15. Black stars who ruined their lives because of alcohol. The truth will shock you. They had the fame, the talent, the money, but behind the red carpets and roaring crowds, these 15 black superstars were silently drowning in alcohol. From near-death experiences to career-ending spirals, their stories will leave you stunned. Some conquered their demons. Others were consumed by them. You think you know your icons? Think again. This is the side of black excellence the spotlight never showed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because what we're about to reveal might change the way you see your favorite stars forever. Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor was more than just a groundbreaking comedian. He was a fearless storyteller who redefined stand-up by confronting racism, poverty, and personal pain with unfiltered truth. But behind the laughter was a man struggling with deep emotional trauma and severe substance abuse, especially alcohol, which nearly destroyed his life and career. Born in 1940 in Peoria, Illinois, Pryor grew up in a turbulent environment filled with violence, abandonment, and instability. These early scars followed him into adulthood, where alcohol became a crutch long before fame found him. By the time he rose to stardom in the late 60s and 70s, he was already heavily dependent on alcohol and other addictive substances, often mixing both in dangerous quantities. Pryor's genius on stage was undeniable, but his addiction soon began to take a visible toll. He would often perform drunk lash-out unpredictably or cancel shows altogether. Industry insiders were torn. They respected his brilliance but feared his volatility. In 1980, tragedy struck when Pryor set himself on fire while freebasing a substance and drinking heavily. The incident left him with severe burns and became a wake-up call, though sobriety remained elusive for years. Pryor later turned the horrifying experience into material for his stand-up routines, showcasing both his pain and brilliance. Though he attempted multiple stints in rehab, the damage to his body and mind had already been done. He was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in the late 80s, and though he continued to act in films like Harlem Nights and See No Evil, Hear No Evil, his health declined rapidly. Pryor passed away in 2005 at age 65, but his influence on comedy remains unmatched. From Dave Chappelle to Eddie Murphy, generations of black comedians owe a debt to his raw honesty and fearlessness. Still, many wonder how much more he could have achieved had addiction not stolen so much of his time, health, and potential. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston was known to the world as The Voice, a once-in-a-generation talent who captivated millions with her soaring vocals and radiant stage presence. But behind the fame, fortune, and flawless image was a woman battling inner demons, particularly her struggles with alcohol and addictive substances that eventually led to one of the most tragic downfalls in music history. Born in 1963 in Newark, New Jersey, Whitney was destined for greatness. As the daughter of gospel singer Cissy Houston and cousin to Dionne Warwick, she grew up surrounded by music. Her debut album in 1985 catapulted her to superstardom, and she quickly became a global icon with hits like I Will Always Love You, Greatest Love of All, and How Will I Know. However, as her fame soared, so did the pressure to stay perfect, maintain a pristine public image, and keep producing hit after hit. By the early 1990s, Whitney had reportedly begun relying on alcohol as a way to cope with the overwhelming stress of fame. Her high-profile and often tumultuous marriage to singer Bobby Brown only fueled the fire as the two became notorious for their substance-fueled arguments and public meltdowns. While many media outlets focused on her use of other substances, few emphasized how deeply alcohol had taken root in her life. It wasn't just a side problem, it became a daily battle. Her once angelic voice began to falter during live performances, and missed concerts or erratic behavior became all too common. Despite multiple stints in rehab and moments of recovery, Whitney struggled to stay sober. In interviews, she often denied the severity of her addiction, famously stating, "Crack is whack," in defense of her reputation. But behind the scenes, her health and relationships were deteriorating. Tragically, on February 11, 2012, Whitney Houston was found unconscious in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. The coroner's report revealed that alcohol and other substances were contributing factors in her accidental drowning. She was only 48. Whitney Houston's story is one of brilliance dimmed too soon. She left behind a musical legacy that remains unmatched, but also a cautionary tale about the pressures of fame, untreated trauma, and the devastating impact of addiction. Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx is one of the most versatile entertainers of his generation, a Grammy-winning singer, an Oscar-winning actor, and a beloved comedian. But behind the charm and charisma, Foxx had his own private battles, particularly with alcohol, that threatened to derail his career and health. Born Eric Marlon Bishop in 1967 in Terrell, Texas, Jamie's rise to fame was anything but typical. After making a name for himself on In Living Color, he went on to conquer music, television, and film. His portrayal of Ray Charles in Ray earned him an Academy Award and launched him into A-list status. But with fame came temptation, and Foxx didn't shy away from it. In multiple interviews, Jamie has openly admitted that he went through a period of excessive partying, especially during his early Hollywood years. He described throwing wild house parties with alcohol flowing all night long and becoming known for creating a party atmosphere wherever he went. What started as celebration soon became dependency. He even admitted that he would use alcohol to calm his nerves before performances and appearances. Though Jamie never spiraled into public scandal like some of his peers, the lifestyle took a toll. Friends and collaborators began to notice a change in his energy, his voice, and his focus. At one point, he confessed that alcohol was beginning to affect not just his performances, but his physical health and mental clarity. What makes Jamie's story different is that he took control before it was too late. In his 40s, he made the conscious decision to cut back on alcohol significantly, stating, "I had to make a change if I wanted to keep doing what I love." He began focusing more on fitness, family, and staying grounded outside of the Hollywood spotlight. In 2023, Jamie suffered a mysterious medical emergency that once again brought his health into the public conversation. While he has not publicly linked the event to past alcohol use, fans and friends alike see it as a reminder of the fragility of even the strongest stars. Today, in 2025, Jamie Foxx remains active in film and music, but he's more private, more health-focused, and less about the Hollywood party life. His journey is a testament to survival and the power of self-awareness before things spiral too far. DMX. Few rappers in history have matched the raw intensity and emotional depth of DMX. Born Earl Simmons in 1970, DMX wasn't just a hip-hop artist, he was a voice for pain, survival, and spiritual struggle. With his signature growl and gritty lyrics, he topped the charts in the late 90s and early 2000s. But behind the tough image was a man consumed by addiction to both alcohol and other powerful substances, a battle that lasted until his tragic death. DMX had a troubled childhood filled with abuse, abandonment, and time spent in group homes. By age 14, he was already using alcohol regularly, often to numb the emotional pain he carried. As he rose to fame with hits like Rough Riders Anthem, Party Up in Here, and Slippin', his inner war only worsened. He often spoke about using alcohol and other substances not for fun, but as a form of self-medication. What made DMX unique was that he never hid his struggles. He openly talked about addiction in interviews, in his music, and even during his live prayers on stage. Yet, despite repeated attempts at rehab, more than a dozen stints over the years, the grip of addiction was relentless. Alcohol was often the substance that pushed him over the edge, intensifying his impulsive behavior, run-ins with the law, and frequent relapses. In between legal troubles and arrests, DMX would experience brief moments of clarity and comeback. Fans hoped for a full recovery. He was working on a new album in 2021 and had recently signed with Def Jam again. But on April 2, 2021, DMX suffered a heart attack reportedly brought on by an overdose. He was hospitalized and placed on life support but never recovered. He died a week later at just 50 years old. DMX's legacy is complicated. A man who inspired millions with his music and vulnerability, yet who couldn't fully conquer the addictions that haunted him. His story is a powerful reminder that fame doesn't shield anyone from trauma, and that untreated pain often resurfaces in the most destructive ways. Samuel L. Jackson. Before he became one of the most bankable and respected actors in Hollywood, Samuel was born in 1948 in Washington, D.C., and raised in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Jackson came from humble beginnings. After studying acting at Morehouse College, he began performing in theater. But during those early years, Jackson found himself falling deeper into the grip of alcoholism and substance use. He often drank heavily before performances and admitted that he couldn't get through the day without using some. By the 1980s, Jackson's drinking had escalated dangerously. He described himself during this time as a functioning addict, able to perform on stage but emotionally distant and disconnected from his family. He later admitted that much of his early acting was done while intoxicated. "I was not present," he confessed in an interview. "I was just showing up." The turning point came in 1991 when his 8-year-old daughter found him passed out on the kitchen floor surrounded by bottles and drug paraphernalia. That moment shook him to the core. With the support of his wife, LaTanya Richardson, Jackson entered rehab. Just weeks after completing treatment, he landed his breakout role as Gator, a crack addict in Spike Lee's Jungle Fever. Ironically, he portrayed on screen the very life he had just left behind. From that moment on, Jackson never looked back. Clean and sober since the early 90s, he went on to build one of the most successful acting careers in history, starring in iconic roles from Pulp Fiction to the Avengers franchise. He has been vocal about his recovery, often crediting it as the foundation for everything he's achieved since. Now in 2025, Samuel L. Jackson stands not just as a Hollywood legend, but as proof that redemption is possible. His story isn't just about talent, it's about resilience, transformation, and the power of second chances. Fantasia Barrino. Fantasia Barrino's rise to fame was the stuff of dreams, but behind the spotlight was a deeply wounded woman struggling with overwhelming pressure, heartbreak, and a dangerous dependence on alcohol that nearly cost her everything. Born in 1984 in High Point, North Carolina, Fantasia came from humble beginnings and a musical church background. She skyrocketed to stardom in 2004 when she won American Idol with her soul-stirring voice and raw authenticity. Her debut single, I Believe, made history as the first by an Idol winner to debut at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. But fame came with a heavy price. Overnight success brought intense scrutiny, personal attacks, and media gossip, much of it focused on her private life. A single mother by 19, Fantasia faced relentless criticism for her relationship's family drama and financial struggles. Behind closed doors, she turned to alcohol to escape the constant noise pressure and emotional exhaustion. In her memoir, Life Is Not a Fairy Tale, Fantasia admitted that she began drinking heavily during her darkest moments, especially after dealing with betrayal in love and overwhelming debt. By 2010, things spiraled. After a highly publicized affair and legal battles, she attempted suicide by overdosing on pills and alcohol, a desperate cry for help rather than a planned exit, she later explained. The incident was a wake-up call. Fantasia entered therapy, leaned into her faith, and began cutting toxic people and habits out of her life, including alcohol. She slowly rebuilt her career with more honest music and fewer headlines. Her powerful 2013 album, Side Effects of You, reflected her journey of pain, redemption, and healing. In recent years, Fantasia has emerged as a stronger, wiser version of herself. Now a proud wife, mother of 3, and businesswoman, she openly speaks about mental health, healing from trauma, and staying sober. Her faith remains the foundation of her recovery. Fantasia is no longer just an Idol winner, she's a survivor, a mentor, and a voice for those struggling in silence. Bobby Brown. Bobby Brown was once the face of a new generation of R&B. With his explosive solo career after leaving New Edition and hits like My Prerogative and Every Little Step, he became known as the King of Stage. But beneath the glitz, Bobby was spiraling into darkness, battling addiction to alcohol and other substances that nearly destroyed his career, his family, and his life. Born in Boston in 1969, Bobby grew up in the rough neighborhoods of Roxbury. He found fame early with New Edition, but by the time he launched his solo career in the late 1980s, he had also discovered the darker side of fame, endless parties, pressure, and easy access to alcohol. As the tabloids began focusing more on his personal life than his music, Bobby became infamous for his wild behavior, erratic public appearances, and run-ins with the law, often fueled by heavy drinking and substance use. Much of his struggle was amplified by his tumultuous relationship with Whitney Houston. Together, they became one of the most talked about and criticized celebrity couples of the early 2000s. Their love was deep but toxic, marked by public arguments, arrests, and years of mutual substance abuse. Bobby often turned to alcohol to cope with the intense spotlight and emotional volatility of their marriage. By the late 2000s, Bobby's world began to collapse. His marriage ended, his career had stalled, and he suffered unimaginable loss. First, the death of Whitney in 2012, then his daughter Bobby Christina in 2015, under eerily similar circumstances. Bobby later admitted that alcohol had been a major factor in numbing the grief and avoiding his feelings. But Brown has shown resilience. In recent years, he's publicly embraced sobriety and faith-seeking therapy, and sharing his journey in documentaries and interviews. He launched the Bobby Brown Foundation to raise awareness about substance abuse and help others avoid the same tragic path. Bobby Brown's legacy is complex. A gifted performer, a troubled soul, and a man still healing from decades of pain and addiction. His story is not just one of fame lost, but one of survival, growth, and redemption. Tracy Morgan. Tracy Morgan has built a reputation as one of the funniest and most unpredictable comedians in entertainment, known for his outrageous characters on Saturday Night Live, his Emmy-nominated role on 30 Rock, and his no-filter stand-up routines. But behind the humor and wild persona was a man quietly battling alcoholism, using it to mask pain, trauma, and years of emotional instability. Born in 1968 in Brooklyn, New York, Tracy's early life was anything but easy. His father, a Vietnam War veteran, died of AIDS when Tracy was a teenager, and the family struggled with poverty. Morgan turned to comedy as a survival mechanism, a way to cope with loss and hardship. But as his fame grew, so did his reliance on alcohol. During the peak of his career on Saturday Night Live and 30 Rock, Morgan became notorious for his hard-partying lifestyle. Behind the scenes, he often showed up to sets hungover or visibly impaired. His heavy drinking began affecting not just his performances, but his relationships with co-stars and family. Several DUI arrests throughout the 2000s painted a troubling picture, and Morgan eventually admitted that he had a serious problem. In 2005, he was ordered by the court to wear a continuous alcohol monitoring device and attend rehab. While he initially resisted change, a health scare pushed him closer to sobriety. Diagnosed with diabetes, Morgan began to understand the long-term damage his drinking was doing to his body. Just as he seemed to be getting his life back on track, tragedy struck in 2014 when a Walmart truck collided with his limo, leaving Morgan in a coma and killing his friend and fellow comedian James McNair. The accident became a turning point. During his long recovery, Tracy reevaluated everything, including his past behaviors and relationship with alcohol. Since the crash, Morgan has returned to television and stand-up with a more grounded, reflective approach. He has remained committed to sobriety, often crediting his second chance at life as motivation to stay clean and focused. While still hilarious, his comedy now carries a deeper emotional core. Tracy Morgan's story is proof that laughter can be both a mask and a path to healing, and that even the wildest spirits can find peace with time, support, and honesty. Don Cornelius. Don Cornelius was the visionary behind Soul Train, the iconic music and dance television show that revolutionized Black entertainment and culture. With his smooth baritone voice and signature sign-off, Love, Peace, and Soul, Cornelius became a beloved figure across generations. But behind the polished image was a man battling internal demons, including a long, quiet struggle with alcohol that worsened as fame faded and personal pain deepened. Born in Chicago in 1936, Cornelius began his career as a police officer before moving into broadcasting. In 1971, he launched Soul Train, a trailblazing platform that gave national exposure to Black musicians, dancers, and culture at a time when few others would. For over 2 decades, he served as host, producer, and guiding force of the show, becoming a cultural icon himself. But as the years passed, Cornelius became increasingly reclusive. After stepping down from Soul Train in the 1990s, he struggled with a sense of purpose. Friends and family later revealed that he began drinking more heavily, often using alcohol, to cope with chronic health issues and the emotional void left by retirement. Despite his outward image of control and grace, Cornelius was reportedly dealing with severe pain from multiple brain surgeries, insomnia, and depression. In 2009, he faced a public scandal after being charged with spousal abuse, an event that marked a sharp departure from the dignified persona fans had known for decades. Sources close to him said his drinking intensified after the incident, further isolating him from loved ones. Tragically, on February 1, 2012, Don Cornelius died by suicide at age 75. His death shocked the entertainment world and prompted conversations about mental health and substance abuse among Black men, issues too often kept in the shadows. While toxicology reports were not widely publicized, many believe that his long-standing battle with alcohol and untreated depression played a role in his final decision. Don Cornelius left behind a legacy that shaped music culture and representation for generations. But his personal story is a reminder that even the brightest lights can suffer in silence. Macy Gray. With her raspy vocals, eccentric style, and unforgettable hit, "I Try," Macy Gray burst onto the music scene in the late 1990s like a breath of fresh air. Her sound was soulful and raw, her presence magnetic. But as her star rose, Macy found herself spiraling into a hidden struggle with alcohol that nearly silenced her voice and her spirit. Born Natalie Renee McIntyre in 1967 in Canton, Ohio, Macy had a unique charm that set her apart from the typical pop or R&B artist. When her debut album On How Life Is became a massive success in 1999, fans embraced her quirky, vulnerable energy. However, the pressures of sudden fame, non-stop touring, and the music industry's relentless demands soon began to take their toll. Macy has since opened up about using alcohol as a form of self-medication. The more her fame grew, the more she relied on drinking to manage the anxiety, isolation, and emotional weight that came with celebrity life. What started as casual drinking quickly evolved into a dangerous dependency. Behind the scenes, she struggled to keep up appearances. Performances were affected, relationships suffered, and creative blocks became more frequent. Despite her outwardly confident persona, Macy admitted in interviews that she was unraveling inside, feeling disconnected from herself and unsure how to cope without a drink in her hand. Eventually, she realized she needed help. After years of denial, Macy began a journey toward sobriety, one that included therapy, spiritual reflection, and rebuilding her sense of self beyond the stage. Her comeback wasn't loud or flashy, but it was rooted in resilience. She returned to music with a deeper emotional depth, exploring topics of vulnerability, love, and mental health in albums like The Way and Ruby. Today, Macy Gray continues to perform advocate for mental wellness and remain unapologetically authentic. Her voice, once nearly drowned out by addiction, is now a symbol of survival. And while she may not chase the charts the way she once did, she's found something far more valuable: clarity, peace, and purpose. Bernie Mac. Bernie Mac was one of the most iconic comedians of his time, raw, fearless, and undeniably funny. With his signature delivery and no-nonsense style, he turned everyday struggles into unforgettable punchlines. But behind the laughter, Bernie fought his own private battles, including a difficult period of heavy drinking that stemmed from grief, insecurity, and the pressures of making it in a ruthless industry. Born Bernard Jeffrey McCulloch in 1957 on the south side of Chicago, Bernie faced hardship from a young age. His mother died when he was just 16, and the pain of that loss lingered for decades. Raised by a single mother in a working-class neighborhood, Bernie knew struggle intimately, and he channeled that into his comedy. But during his early years in stand-up, when bookings were scarce and rejection was constant, Bernie turned to alcohol to cope. Friends recall that Bernie would often drink before shows to calm his nerves or numb his feelings. The bottle became a companion during long nights on the road in empty clubs and while chasing a dream that at times felt impossible. While never a public scandal, Bernie later admitted that during the 80s and early 90s, alcohol was a crutch, one he leaned on too often when the world became too heavy. But Bernie's turning point came when he realized he was setting a poor example for his daughter and endangering his marriage. He made the decision to stop drinking, focusing instead on family faith and sharpening his craft. That decision paid off big time. In the 2000s, Bernie Mac became a household name, starring in the original kings of comedy, The Bernie Mac Show, and hit films like Ocean's 11 and Mr. 3000. He brought a new level of heart and honesty to his comedy, one that came from surviving real pain and making peace with his past. Tragically, Bernie died in 2008 from complications of pneumonia. He was just 50. But in the years since, his legacy has only grown as a comic legend, a family man, and someone who fought to overcome his inner demons long before the world knew his name. Jussie Smollett. Jussie Smollett once stood at the height of Hollywood success. As the breakout star of the hit series Empire, he was praised not only for his talent as an actor and singer, but also for his openness about being a proud black gay man in the spotlight. But as fast as he rose, Smollett's world began to unravel, and behind the headlines was a man struggling quietly with the pressures of identity, public scrutiny, and a growing dependence on alcohol. Born in 1982 in Santa Rosa, California, Jussie began acting as a child alongside his siblings. But it was his role as Jamal Lyon on Empire that made him a household name. Charismatic and compelling, Smollett seemed unstoppable. But fame brought more than red carpets. It brought criticism, controversy, and crushing expectations. By the late 2010s, Jussie was reportedly using alcohol more heavily, especially during times of personal and professional crisis. Friends and insiders have hinted that he often turned to drinking to numb the emotional toll of public life, especially in moments when the media turned hostile or when he faced backlash from both supporters and critics. The turning point came in 2019, when Smollett was accused of staging a hate crime against himself in Chicago. The incident sparked a firestorm of media attention, legal battles, and public ridicule. Throughout the scandal, Jussie remained defiant, but those close to him later revealed that he spiraled emotionally, leaning on alcohol as a coping mechanism while the world picked apart his character. The legal fallout included multiple charges, a conviction, and jail time, but the emotional cost was even greater. Smollett's career stalled, his reputation was shattered, and the support he once enjoyed in the industry dwindled. In interviews and statements since, Jussie has spoken of isolation, mental health struggles, and the desire to heal, though he has not publicly gone into depth about his alcohol use. Today, Smollett remains a deeply polarizing figure, but his story is more than a headline. It's about the immense pressure of living under a microscope and the quiet personal demons that can emerge when fame fades. Whether or not redemption lies ahead, one thing is clear. Jussie Smollett's battle with alcohol reflects a deeper story of pain, identity, and the search for peace. Aretha Franklin. Aretha Franklin was a towering figure in American music, a voice of power, dignity, and soul that could shake the rafters of any church or stadium. With over 75 million records sold and countless accolades, she was more than a singer, she was a cultural icon. But behind the crown of Queen of Soul was a woman who wrestled with deep personal pain, heartbreak, and a quiet battle with alcohol that few ever saw. Born in 1942 in Memphis, Tennessee, and raised in Detroit, Aretha's life was shaped by gospel music and the civil rights movement. She began singing in church at a young age and quickly became known for her raw, emotional delivery. By the late 1960s, she was a household name with hits like Respect Natural Woman and Chain of Fools. But as her career soared, her personal life was unraveling. Aretha experienced multiple tragedies that weighed heavily on her: the death of her father, Reverend C.L. Franklin, who had been in a coma for years following a shooting, the loss of several siblings, and a series of failed relationships. These emotional wounds, coupled with the enormous pressure of being a black woman in a male-dominated industry, left her vulnerable. Though not often publicly acknowledged, several sources close to the singer have indicated that Aretha used alcohol during the darker periods of her life, particularly in the late 1970s and early 1980s, when her career had temporarily cooled and personal issues mounted. Her drinking reportedly increased during moments of extreme stress, grief, and isolation. While she was never tabloid fodder in the way some contemporaries were insiders, say she struggled privately with emotional eating and drinking as a form of escape. Despite these battles, Aretha never allowed her demons to define her. She reclaimed her crown with a powerful resurgence in the 1980s, producing hit albums, performing for presidents, and becoming the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Her strength, both on and off stage, was legendary. Aretha Franklin passed away in 2018 at the age of 76, leaving behind a legacy of resilience, excellence, and grace. Though her struggles were often hidden from view, they were part of what made her voice so deeply human, full of pain, perseverance, and soul. Eddie Griffin. Eddie Griffin is known for his unfiltered mouth, electric energy, and sharp wit. From sold-out comedy tours to scene-stealing film roles in Undercover Brother and Deuce Bigalow, Male Gigolo, Griffin has made a name for himself as one of the boldest voices in comedy. But behind the rapid-fire jokes and outrageous stage presence was a man who spent years wrestling with alcohol, a vice that nearly consumed his talent, reputation, and life. Born in Kansas City, Missouri in 1968, Eddie had a rough start. Raised in a strict religious household and exposed to hardship at a young age, comedy became his weapon of choice against pain. By the time he entered Hollywood in the 1990s, Griffin had become a wild card, both a rising star and a tabloid magnet. During his peak, Griffin's lifestyle was defined by excess. He drank heavily, partied relentlessly, and often got into public altercations or made headlines for reckless behavior. While fans loved his raw honesty and unpredictable humor, many didn't realize how deeply alcohol had embedded itself in his daily life. Friends and collaborators described him as brilliant but volatile, sometimes showing up to sets or shows visibly intoxicated. The tipping point came after multiple brushes with the law, including DUIs and reckless driving charges, most notably an incident where he crashed a $1.5 million Ferrari during a promotional event. For Griffin, it wasn't just about embarrassment, it was a wake-up call. He began to recognize that alcohol wasn't just hurting his career, it was destroying his focus, his relationships, and his sense of self. In the years that followed, Eddie took steps toward sobriety. Though he didn't do a formal rehab stint, he gradually removed alcohol from his lifestyle, replacing it with a renewed focus on family spirituality and purpose. He has since spoken candidly about the challenges of staying sober in the entertainment world, but also about the clarity and strength it brought him. Today, Eddie Griffin is still performing sharper, wiser, and more grounded. His comedy remains raw and uncensored, but it now carries the weight of lived experience. He's proof that even the loudest voices can quietly choose peace. Nina Simone. Nina Simone was more than a musician, she was a force of nature. A classically trained pianist, jazz singer, and unflinching civil rights activist, Simone used her voice as both a weapon and a sanctuary. Songs like Mississippi Goddamn I Put a Spell on You and Four Women shook the world with truth and fury. But behind that unmatched brilliance was a woman living with intense inner turmoil, much of which she drowned in alcohol. Born Eunice Kathleen Wayman in 1933 in North Carolina, Simone grew up in the Jim Crow South, experiencing racism firsthand. Her dream of becoming a classical pianist was denied when she was rejected by the Curtis Institute of Music, a blow that haunted her for decades. That pain, combined with the emotional violence she endured in her personal life, including an abusive marriage and ongoing mental health challenges, became the emotional foundation of her art and her eventual descent into addiction. Simone's battle with alcohol wasn't widely publicized during her lifetime, but those closest to her saw it unfold. As her fame rose in the 1960s, so did her political activism and her rage, often directed at injustice, but increasingly turned inward. Alcohol became a tool to cope with her growing isolation, untreated bipolar disorder, and the relentless demands placed on her as both a woman and a symbol. Her drinking worsened during her self-imposed exile from the United States. Living in Liberia, Switzerland, and later France, she became increasingly erratic. Concerts were missed or ended in outbursts, and her physical health began to deteriorate. Friends described Simone as unpredictable, brilliant one day, withdrawn or combative the next, often depending on her drinking and medication. Despite her struggles, Simone never lost her genius. Even in her darkest moments, her music retained its soul-piercing honesty. Toward the end of her life, she spoke more openly about her pain, her mental health, and the self-destructive habits she regretted but could never fully escape. Nina Simone died in 2003, leaving behind a legacy of unmatched depth, courage, and complexity. Her battle with alcohol was just one part of a larger war with racism, rejection, and her own mind. And yet her music still stands raw, real, and eternal. These 15 legends remind us that behind the fame, fortune, and talent, there are battles many never see. Alcoholism doesn't discriminate. Even the strongest icons can fall. But do we honor their legacies enough while they're still alive, or only after tragedy strikes? Let's talk about that. Was the industry partly to blame, or should personal accountability come first? Drop your thoughts below. This conversation isn't just about the past. It's about how we protect our legends in the future. Subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence for more untold truths behind the spotlight.